Nobody wanted the farmhouse. It had been sealed for 40 years, forgotten by everyone in town. But when a retired soldier opened its doors, his German shepherd heard something the world had left behind. Nathan Walker never expected a $5 farmhouse to become the beginning of a new chapter in his life. After decades of serving in the United States military, he had learned how to live with uncertainty. He knew how to move forward when everything changed. But after retirement, the quiet felt different. The missions were gone. The routines disappeared. And for the first time in years, Nathan had to answer a question he never had time to ask before. What comes after serving others? The answer did not come from a plan. It came from an old farmhouse sitting alone at the edge of a quiet rural road in Montana. The property had been listed at an unusual price because nobody wanted it. The records showed the same thing everyone in town already knew. The farmhouse had been closed for 40 years. No family had lived there. No repairs had been made. No one had opened the front door since the last owner disappeared from public life. Most people saw a problem. Nathan saw a chance. He was not looking for luxury. He was not searching for wealth. He only wanted a place where he could finally feel at home. Beside him stood Ranger, his German shepherd, watching the old farmhouse with calm curiosity. The dog had been Nathan's companion through the hardest transitions of his life. Ranger never needed explanations. He simply stayed close, reminding Nathan that some forms of loyalty did not require words. When they arrived at the property, the farmhouse looked exactly like the rumors described. The white paint had faded from years of weather. Tall grass surrounded the porch. The windows reflected the empty fields around it. Yet there was something about the house that felt different. It did not feel abandoned. It felt like it was waiting. Nathan unlocked the front door for the first time in 4 decades. The hinges released a quiet sound as the door opened slowly. Inside, time seemed to stop. A wooden table remained in the kitchen. Old photographs rested on shelves. A calendar from 40 years earlier still hung on the wall. It was as if someone had stepped away and planned to return. Ranger walked carefully through the rooms, observing every corner. Nathan smiled softly. "Take it easy, boy. We have plenty of time." The farmhouse was not frightening. It was simply full of questions. Why had someone left everything behind? Why had nobody returned? And why did the previous owner make sure the house stayed sealed for so long? As Nathan explored the living room, he discovered a small collection of handwritten notes inside an old drawer. They were not about money or property. They were simple messages written by someone who believed memories mattered. One note said, "A home remembers the people who loved it." Nathan read the words twice. After years of following orders and completing missions, those simple sentences felt strangely familiar. They reminded him that every place carries a story, and every person leaves something behind. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Nathan sat on the farmhouse porch with Ranger beside him. The world was quiet except for the sound of wind moving through the fields. For the first time in a long while, Nathan did not feel like he was waiting for the next assignment. He felt like he had arrived somewhere. But inside the farmhouse, something remained hidden. Something that had waited patiently for 40 years. Later that night, Ranger suddenly lifted his head and looked toward the old hallway. The German shepherd stood still, listening carefully. Nathan followed his gaze. At first, he heard nothing. Then came a faint sound from behind the wall. Not a voice, not a movement. Just a quiet reminder that this farmhouse still had a story to tell. Nathan looked at Ranger, and he understood one thing. He had not bought a forgotten house. He had stepped into a mystery that had been waiting for the right person to open the door. The sound behind the old farmhouse wall disappeared before Nathan Walker could understand what he had heard. For several seconds, he and Ranger stood in the quiet hallway, listening to the silence return. The German shepherd looked toward the wall one more time before slowly turning back to Nathan. It was not fear in the dog's eyes. It was curiosity, the kind that suggested something had been missed. The next morning, Nathan woke up early and began exploring the farmhouse with a different feeling. The place was no longer just an abandoned property. It was a story waiting to be understood. Sunlight entered through the dusty windows, revealing details that had been hidden for decades. Old books sat neatly on shelves. Family photographs remained untouched on the walls. A small wooden chair rested beside the fireplace as if someone had planned to sit there again. Nathan moved carefully through each room, respecting the feeling that someone's memories still lived inside the walls. Ranger followed close behind, occasionally stopping to examine corners and spaces that Nathan would have ignored. The dog's attention reminded Nathan to slow down. For years, Nathan had lived by schedules and instructions. Everything had a purpose. Every moment had a mission. But this farmhouse was different. Here, he was learning how to simply notice. While cleaning the kitchen, Nathan discovered a drawer beneath an old cabinet that was difficult to open. Inside were several envelopes tied together with a faded piece of string. The paper had aged, but the handwriting remained clear. The letters were written by someone named Samuel Carter, the last person who officially owned the farmhouse. Nathan sat at the kitchen table and began reading. The letters were not about business or money. They were about people. Samuel wrote about neighbors, friends, and strangers who had needed help during difficult seasons of their lives. He described the farmhouse as more than a building. To him, it was a place where people could rest, recover, and remember they were not alone. Nathan felt something change as he read those words. He understood that feeling. During his years in the military, he had met many people who carried invisible burdens. Some needed answers. Some needed support. Some simply needed someone to sit beside them. The farmhouse seemed to hold the same purpose. It was not empty. It was waiting. Later that afternoon, Nathan visited the nearby town to learn more about Samuel Carter. The locals remembered the name, but their voices became quieter whenever the farmhouse was mentioned. An older man at the general store told Nathan that Samuel was known for helping others, but one day everything changed. Samuel closed the farmhouse, refused to sell it, and never allowed anyone inside again. People thought he was hiding something valuable, the man said. But Samuel always said the most valuable things were not things at all. Nathan remembered those words as he drove back through the countryside. When he returned, Ranger immediately walked toward the hallway where they had heard the sound the night before. The German shepherd stopped near the wall and lowered his head. Nathan looked carefully and noticed something unusual. One section of the wooden floor looked slightly different from the rest. The boards were older, but one piece had been replaced more recently. He knelt down and brushed away the dust. Beneath the surface was a small metal latch. Nathan stared at it for a moment. The farmhouse had been sealed for 40 years, yet someone had left a hidden way to open something inside. He looked at Ranger and smiled softly. "You found this, didn't you?" The dog gently wagged his tail. Nathan opened the latch and discovered a small compartment beneath the floor. Inside was a worn leather notebook wrapped carefully in cloth. The first page contained a message written by Samuel Carter himself. "If you are reading this, then the farmhouse has found someone who will listen." Nathan turned the page slowly. The notebook was filled with stories, but one name appeared again and again. A person Samuel called the reason he never gave up on helping others. Nathan did not know who that person was yet, but as Ranger rested beside him and the evening light filled the old farmhouse, Nathan realized something important. He was no longer searching through an abandoned house. He was uncovering a promise that had been waiting 40 years to be remembered. The leather notebook felt fragile in Nathan Walker's hands, but the words written inside carried a strength that had survived 40 years of silence. Sitting at the old farmhouse kitchen table, Nathan slowly turned each page while Ranger rested nearby. The German shepherd watched quietly, as if he understood that every sentence mattered. The notebook belonged to Samuel Carter, the man who had sealed this farmhouse away from the world. But the more Nathan read, the more he realized Samuel was not trying to hide a secret. He was trying to protect a memory. The first pages described the early years of the farmhouse. Samuel had not purchased the property because it was valuable. He chose it because it was peaceful. He believed a simple home could become a place where people found comfort when life became uncertain. Nathan read about strangers who arrived with heavy hearts and left with renewed hope. Samuel wrote about farmers struggling through difficult seasons, families searching for a fresh start, and veterans trying to understand life after service. Each story carried the same message. People did not always need someone to solve every problem. Sometimes they only needed someone who would listen. Nathan paused at those words. They felt personal. After retiring from the military, he had discovered that silence could be harder than any assignment. He had spent years knowing exactly what was expected of him. But once that chapter ended, he wondered where he belonged. Ranger had been the one constant in his life, always beside him during the uncertain days. Now this old farmhouse seemed to be offering another answer. As Nathan continued reading, He reached a section where Samuel wrote about a young soldier who visited the farmhouse many years earlier. The soldier had arrived carrying memories he could not easily explain and questions he could not answer. Samuel described him as someone who had spent his life protecting others but had forgotten how to care for himself. Nathan looked away from the notebook for a moment. The description felt strangely familiar. He wondered if Samuel had somehow written about people like him long before they ever met. The next pages revealed more about the soldier. His name was never written, but Samuel mentioned a small detail. The soldier carried a worn military identification tag and always sat near the farmhouse window watching the fields. Samuel wrote that he saw something special in that young man, not because he was perfect, but because he was still searching for purpose. Nathan looked around the room. The same window described in the notebook was still there. The same fields stretched beyond the glass. For a moment, it felt like the past and present were standing in the same place. That evening, Nathan returned to town and spoke with the older residents again. He asked about the soldier mentioned in Samuel's notebook. Most people did not know much, but one woman remembered something important. Her name was Clara Bennett, and she had known Samuel for many years. She told Nathan that Samuel rarely spoke about that time, but he always kept one photograph locked away. He said that young man reminded him of why kindness mattered, Clara explained. Nathan thanked her and returned to the farmhouse with more questions than answers. When he arrived, Ranger immediately walked toward the hidden compartment beneath the floor. Nathan followed and searched through the remaining items inside. At the bottom of the box, beneath old letters and photographs, he found a small envelope. Unlike everything else, this envelope had a newer appearance. His name was written on the front, Nathan Walker. He stared at it in disbelief. Samuel Carter had been gone for years, yet somehow this message had been waiting for him. Nathan opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single page with only a few lines. The person who finds this farmhouse must understand one thing. The greatest discoveries are not hidden in walls. They are found in the lives we choose to touch. Nathan read the message again while Ranger sat beside him. The secret inside the farmhouse was becoming clearer. It was not about what Samuel left behind. It was about what he hoped someone would continue. But as Nathan turned the page over, he noticed one final sentence written at the bottom. To understand everything, find the room beneath the room. Nathan looked toward the old floor beneath his feet. The farmhouse still had another secret waiting. The phrase written at the bottom of Samuel Carter's letter stayed in Nathan Walker's mind long after the farmhouse fell silent that night. Find the room beneath the room. It sounded impossible, but after everything he had discovered, Nathan knew better than to ignore the signs hidden throughout the old house. Samuel had spent 40 years protecting a story, and every clue seemed to lead deeper into the heart of the farmhouse. The next morning, Nathan returned to the kitchen floor where he had found the hidden compartment. Ranger stood beside him, watching carefully as Nathan examined the old wooden boards. The German shepherd had a quiet patience that reminded Nathan to slow down and observe. After several minutes, Nathan noticed something unusual near the corner of the room. One section of the floor had a slightly different color. It was almost impossible to see unless someone knew where to look. Nathan carefully lifted the old boards and discovered a narrow space underneath. Inside was a small metal handle covered with dust. He pulled gently, and a hidden staircase appeared beneath the farmhouse. Nathan stood still for a moment. The house that everyone believed was empty had been holding another world beneath it. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped down carefully with Ranger following close behind. The underground room was not large, but it was filled with carefully preserved memories. Wooden shelves lined the walls. Boxes were organized by year. Old photographs rested beside handwritten journals. Unlike a place meant to hide something valuable, this room felt like a place created to protect something meaningful. Nathan opened the nearest box and discovered dozens of letters. Each one carried a different name. Each one told a different story. Some were from people Samuel had helped. Some were from families who had found support at the farmhouse. Others were from veterans who had arrived feeling lost and left feeling hopeful. Nathan slowly understood the purpose of the hidden room. Samuel had not buried secrets. He had protected stories. In the center of the room was a large wooden desk. On top of it was a journal with Samuel's name carved into the cover. Nathan opened it carefully and began reading. The first pages explained why Samuel created the hidden room. He wanted future generations to understand that ordinary acts of kindness could become extraordinary memories. He wrote that people often searched for valuable things in the wrong places. They looked for gold, money, and possessions. But the greatest treasures were the moments when someone chose to care for another person. Nathan felt the weight of those words. He had spent much of his life serving others, but he rarely thought about the quiet impact of those moments. He remembered people he had met during his military years. People who needed encouragement. People who needed someone to believe in them. Maybe Samuel understood something he was only beginning to see. A person could change another person's life without ever knowing it. As Nathan continued through the journal, he found a section dedicated to the unnamed soldier Samuel had written about. This time, there was more information. Samuel explained that the soldier had arrived at the farmhouse after completing his service. He carried memories of places he had been and people he had lost contact with. Samuel wanted him to understand that his life still had meaning beyond his uniform. Nathan read the passage several times because the message felt deeply personal. The soldier had once stood exactly where Nathan stood now, searching for a new direction. At the bottom of the page, Samuel had written one final note. Some people spend their lives protecting others. Sometimes they need someone to protect their hope. Nathan lowered the journal and looked at Ranger. The German shepherd gently rested his head against Nathan's hand. In that quiet underground room, Nathan realized the farmhouse had never been waiting for someone to discover a secret. It had been waiting for someone who understood the meaning behind it. But before leaving, Nathan noticed one final object hidden inside the desk drawer. A small photograph wrapped in cloth. When he opened it, he saw Samuel standing beside the young soldier from the journal. On the back of the photograph was a name. Nathan froze when he read it. The soldier was not just a stranger from the past. He was connected to Nathan's own story in a way he never expected. The photograph in Nathan Walker's hand changed everything. For several moments, he stood quietly inside the hidden room beneath the farmhouse, staring at the image of Samuel Carter standing beside the young soldier he had written about for so many years. The face of the soldier was familiar, but Nathan could not understand why. He turned the photograph over again and read the name written on the back. James Walker. Nathan's last name. His family name. The discovery felt impossible. He looked at Ranger, who remained beside him, calm and steady as always. The German shepherd seemed to sense that this moment carried a different kind of weight. Nathan carefully placed the photograph on the desk and returned to Samuel's journal. His hands moved slowly as he searched for more answers. The connection between Samuel and James Walker was no longer just a mystery. It was part of Nathan's own history. The pages revealed that James Walker had visited the farmhouse many years earlier, shortly after leaving military service. Like Nathan, James had struggled with the transition into a quieter life. Samuel wrote that James was a good man who spent years putting others first, but had forgotten that he also deserved support. Nathan paused when he read those words. It felt like Samuel was describing more than his grandfather. It felt like he was describing a pattern that passed through generations. The journal explained that James and Samuel became close friends during the months James stayed at the farmhouse. Samuel helped him rebuild his confidence, and James helped Samuel understand the importance of supporting veterans after their service ended. Together, they created a small tradition. They welcomed people who needed a place to rest, reflect, and discover their next step. Nathan sat at the old desk and looked around the hidden room. Suddenly, the farmhouse felt different. It was not just connected to Samuel. It was connected to his own family. A place he thought he had discovered by chance had been part of his story all along. Later that afternoon, Nathan returned to the main house and searched through the old family records he had brought with him. He remembered stories from childhood about his grandfather, but nobody had ever mentioned Samuel Carter or the farmhouse. Why had this connection been forgotten? Why had James never spoken about this place? The answer appeared in another letter hidden inside Samuel's journal. It was written by James himself. In the letter, James explained that after leaving the farmhouse, he wanted to create a better future for his family. He knew the lessons he learned from Samuel were important, but he also knew the world around him had changed. He asked Samuel to protect the farmhouse until the right person could continue the mission. Someone who understood service. Someone who understood compassion. Someone who would not see the farmhouse as property, but as a responsibility. Nathan read the letter several times. The meaning became clear. The farmhouse had not been abandoned because nobody cared. It had been protected because someone believed the right person would eventually return. That person was Nathan. As evening approached, Nathan walked outside with Ranger and stood beside the old porch. The fields stretched quietly in front of them, just as they had for decades. He thought about his grandfather, a man who had carried the same questions Nathan carried now. What happens when the uniform comes off? Where does purpose come from after service ends? The answer was standing around him. It came from helping others. It came from connection. It came from understanding that a person's impact could continue long after they were gone. Ranger sat beside him, looking toward the farmhouse. Nathan placed a hand gently on the dog's shoulder and smiled. The German shepherd had led him to the hidden rooms, but the deeper discovery was not inside the walls. It was inside the story of his own family. Before going back inside, Nathan noticed something near the porch steps. A small wooden box had been hidden beneath an old board. Inside was another letter from Samuel. This one was addressed directly to him. The first sentence was simple. If you are reading this, then the farmhouse finally found its caretaker. Nathan looked toward the lights inside the old house. The journey that began with a $5 purchase was becoming something much greater. But Samuel's final message held one more truth waiting to be discovered. The letter from Samuel Carter remained on Nathan Walker's mind long after he finished reading it. Standing on the porch of the old farmhouse, Nathan looked across the quiet fields and tried to understand the path that had brought him there. What began as a $5 purchase had become something far greater than he ever imagined. This farmhouse was not just a building. It was a connection between generations, a reminder that some promises can survive longer than a lifetime. Ranger sat beside him, watching the fields with the same calm attention he had shown from the beginning. The German shepherd had never needed to understand every detail. He simply stayed close, guiding Nathan through moments when answers were difficult to find. The next morning, Nathan opened Samuel's final letter again. The message was short, but every word carried meaning. Samuel explained that the farmhouse was never meant to belong to one person. It was meant to belong to everyone who needed a place to begin again. He wrote about James Walker and the promise they made together. They wanted the farmhouse to become a place where veterans, families, and people facing uncertain seasons could find support. But Samuel also wrote something that surprised Nathan. The farmhouse had been sealed because the mission was not finished. Samuel believed that opening the doors too early would turn the place into just another property. He wanted the next caretaker to understand the heart behind it first. Nathan slowly realized why everything had happened in the order it did. If he had discovered the farmhouse without understanding Samuel's story, he might have only seen an old building. But now he saw something different. He saw a responsibility passed from one person to another. That afternoon, Nathan began exploring the farmhouse with a new purpose. He opened rooms that had remained untouched for decades. He cleaned carefully, preserving the details that made the home special. Old photographs were placed safely together. Samuel's journals were organized. The letters from former visitors were protected so their stories would never disappear. Ranger followed him through every room, occasionally stopping beside objects that seemed important. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Nathan found another collection of boxes hidden beneath old blankets. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes from people who had visited the farmhouse over the years. Some thanked Samuel for offering them a place to rest. Others described how a simple conversation changed their lives. Nathan sat on the attic floor reading each note. He realized that Samuel had measured success differently from most people. He did not count money earned or things collected. He counted moments when someone felt less alone. That lesson stayed with Nathan. For years, he had believed his greatest contributions came from his time in uniform. He respected those years and the people he served beside, but he now understood something important. Service did not end when a mission was complete. It continued through every choice to help another person. Later that evening, Nathan visited the town and shared his plans with Margaret Collins and the other residents. He told them he wanted to restore the farmhouse, not as a private home, but as a place where people could find support again. The response was quiet at first. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, people offered to help. Someone brought tools. Someone offered supplies. Someone shared another story about Samuel that Nathan had never heard. The farmhouse was bringing people together before the doors had even fully opened. As the restoration continued, Nathan noticed something changing inside himself. The emptiness he had felt after retirement was slowly being replaced by a new sense of direction. He was no longer searching for the next mission. He had found it. One evening, while walking through the farmhouse with Ranger, Nathan returned to the hidden room beneath the floor. He looked at the shelves, the letters, and the memories Samuel had protected for so long. Then he noticed a small envelope placed behind the old journal. It was the last thing left untouched. On the front were 4 words written in Samuel's handwriting. For the final choice. Nathan opened it slowly. Inside was a message that would decide the future of the farmhouse. Samuel had left one final question. Not about ownership, not about money, but about the kind of person Nathan wanted to become. Nathan Walker held Samuel Carter's final letter in his hands for several minutes before reading the first line again. The message was not a set of instructions. It was not a list of responsibilities. It was a question. Samuel had written, "A home is not measured by what it holds inside. It is measured by what it gives to those who enter." Nathan sat quietly in the hidden room beneath the farmhouse, surrounded by 40 years of memories, and felt the meaning behind those words. He had spent most of his life following a mission created by others. Now, for the first time, the choice belonged completely to him. Ranger rested beside the old desk, his German shepherd eyes watching Nathan with quiet patience. The dog had followed him through every discovery, every unanswered question, and every moment when the past felt overwhelming. Nathan smiled softly and placed a hand on Ranger's shoulder. "I think we finally understand why we were brought here." Over the following weeks, Nathan worked to restore the farmhouse. He did not rush. Every room carried a story, and he wanted to protect those stories before changing anything. The kitchen where Samuel wrote his letters remained almost exactly the same. The hidden room beneath the floor became a place where the old journals and photographs could be safely preserved. The empty bedrooms slowly transformed into comfortable spaces for people who needed a place to stay and reflect. The farmhouse was beginning to breathe again. As word spread through the small Montana community, more people came to help. They did not come because the farmhouse was valuable. They came because they remembered what Samuel had represented. Margaret Collins brought old photographs from the town archives. She explained that many people had forgotten how much Samuel had done because he never wanted recognition. He always believed kindness was something you gave, not something you displayed, she told Nathan. Those words stayed with him. Nathan started to understand that Samuel's greatest achievement was never the farmhouse itself. It was the invisible connection between people created inside those walls. One afternoon, while organizing the letters from Samuel's hidden room, Nathan discovered a name that appeared many times. It belonged to a veteran who had visited the farmhouse years earlier and later helped others begin new lives. Nathan realized the mission Samuel started had continued far beyond the farmhouse. A single act of compassion had traveled through generations. That evening, Nathan walked outside with Ranger and watched the sunset over the fields. The same fields that had surrounded the farmhouse for decades now looked different. The place no longer felt forgotten. It felt alive. "You know, Ranger," Nathan said quietly, "I spent years thinking my purpose was behind me." The German shepherd looked up at him. Maybe it was just waiting somewhere else. A few days later, Nathan opened the farmhouse doors for the first small gathering. It was not a grand event. There were no speeches or celebrations. Just neighbors sitting together, sharing stories, drinking coffee, and remembering the people who had shaped their lives. Nathan watched as strangers became friends inside the same rooms that had been silent for 40 years. For the first time, he understood exactly what Samuel wanted. The farmhouse was never meant to preserve the past. It was meant to create a future. As the evening ended, Nathan returned to the hidden room one more time. He looked at the old desk where Samuel had written his final messages. On the surface was a small wooden box he had not noticed before. Inside was a simple metal tag with a handwritten note attached. The note contained only one sentence. "Every caretaker eventually becomes part of the story." Nathan held the tag carefully and looked around the room. The secret of the farmhouse was no longer hidden. It was living through every person who walked through the doors. But as Nathan placed the tag beside Samuel's journal, he noticed one final detail carved into the wooden box. A date. A date. That was only a few months away. Nathan realized Samuel had planned one more thing before the farmhouse was truly complete. The date carved into the wooden box stayed in Nathan Walker's thoughts long after he discovered it. It was not just another clue from Samuel Carter's past. It was a reminder that the farmhouse story was still moving forward. Samuel had planned something beyond his own lifetime, and now Nathan needed to understand what that final step meant. The next morning, Nathan brought the wooden box outside and sat on the porch with Ranger beside him. The German shepherd watched the fields while the early morning light covered the farmhouse in a warm golden glow. For the first time since arriving, Nathan did not see an abandoned property. He saw a place that had been patiently waiting for a new beginning. Inside the box was a small collection of documents, carefully organized by Samuel. There were names, dates, and handwritten notes about people who had visited the farmhouse over the years. Nathan recognized a pattern. Samuel had not simply helped people pass through difficult moments. He had created a chain of kindness that continued long after those moments ended. At the bottom of the box was one final document. It was a plan Samuel had written for the future of the farmhouse. He wanted the property to become a place where veterans could reconnect, families could gather, and anyone feeling lost could find a quiet place to begin again. Nathan read the words slowly. The dream was clear, but the responsibility felt heavy. He wondered if he was truly the right person to continue something Samuel had built with so much care. That evening, Nathan walked through every room of the farmhouse. He looked at the old photographs, the restored kitchen, and the hidden room beneath the floor. Every corner carried a message from the past. Samuel had never expected perfection. He only wanted someone willing to continue showing up for others. Ranger followed him through the house, stopping near the doorway of each room as if checking that everything was ready. Nathan laughed softly. You have been the best guide I could have asked for. The German shepherd gently wagged his tail and stayed close. Over the next several days, Nathan shared Samuel's vision with the community. He expected questions and hesitation, but instead, people offered support. The same neighbors who once saw the farmhouse as a forgotten building now saw it as something meaningful. Local farmers helped repair the fence. Retired residents brought furniture and supplies. Younger people from town helped clean the surrounding property. Everyone contributed something small, and together those small acts created something much larger. Nathan began to understand the lessons Samuel had left behind. A home was not restored by one person alone. It was restored by everyone who cared enough to help. As the farmhouse transformation continued, Nathan received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a note from someone who had heard about Samuel's farmhouse. The writer explained that their family had once received help from Samuel during a difficult time. They had never forgotten his kindness and wanted Nathan to know that the farmhouse had touched more lives than he could imagine. Nathan read the letter quietly while Ranger rested beside him. He realized the hidden room beneath the farmhouse had contained more than memories. It had contained proof that kindness could travel through time. A few weeks later, the farmhouse was ready for its first official gathering. Nathan stood at the front porch and watched people arrive. Some came as strangers. Others came carrying stories connected to Samuel. The house that had been silent for 40 years was filled with conversation again. Laughter moved through the rooms. Lights filled the windows. The farmhouse finally felt alive. As the evening ended, Nathan walked into the hidden room one last time before closing the door. He placed Samuel's journal on the old desk and looked at the shelves filled with memories. Then he noticed something he had missed before. A small envelope tucked behind the wooden panel of the desk. It had Nathan's name written on it. Inside was Samuel's final message. The caretaker does not inherit a house. The caretaker inherits a promise. Nathan held the letter close and looked toward the doorway where Ranger was waiting. He finally understood the truth. He had not discovered the farmhouse's secret. He had discovered his own reason for being there. But the journey was not finished yet. Samuel's final promise still had one more chapter waiting. The farmhouse was no longer a forgotten place. The same doors that had remained closed for 40 years were now open every morning, welcoming people who needed a quiet moment, a warm conversation, or simply a reminder that they were not alone. Nathan Walker stood on the porch one early morning and watched the sunlight move across the fields. Beside him, Ranger rested peacefully, his German shepherd coat glowing beneath the golden light. Nathan thought about everything that had happened since the day he bought the old property for $5. He had arrived searching for a place to start over. Instead, he discovered a story that had been waiting for him all along. The final message from Samuel Carter remained with him every day. The caretaker did not inherit a house. The caretaker inherited a promise. Nathan finally understood that the farmhouse was never about ownership. It was about continuing something that mattered. Over the following months, the farmhouse became a place where people gathered and shared their stories. Veterans visited to talk with others who understood the challenges of moving into a new chapter of life. Families came to enjoy the peaceful surroundings. Neighbors who had once walked past the abandoned property now stopped by to help and share memories. The farmhouse had become exactly what Samuel had imagined decades earlier. A place built not from expensive materials or grand designs, but from compassion. Nathan often walked through the hidden room beneath the floor where the journey began. He kept Samuel's journals carefully organized and preserved the letters that carried so many memories. Sometimes he would sit at the old desk and read the words again. Every letter reminded him of the same truth. One person's kindness could continue long after that person was gone. One small decision to help someone could create a future nobody expected. Ranger became a familiar presence around the farmhouse. Visitors quickly learned that the German Shepherd was always nearby. He greeted people at the door, walked through the rooms with quiet confidence, and seemed to know when someone needed a little extra comfort. Nathan smiled whenever he saw it. He knew Ranger had been more than a companion during this journey. The dog had been the first to notice what others ignored. He had guided Nathan toward the hidden spaces, but more importantly, he had helped Nathan slow down and see the meaning behind them. One afternoon, Nathan received another letter. This time, it came from a family connected to James Walker, his grandfather. They had heard about the restored farmhouse and wanted to share one final piece of the story. Inside the letter was a photograph of James and Samuel standing together outside the farmhouse many years earlier. On the back was a handwritten note from James. Some places remember us because they carry the kindness we leave behind. Nathan held the photograph for a long time. He thought about his grandfather, Samuel, and everyone who had passed through the farmhouse before him. Their lives were connected by simple choices. Helping someone, listening to someone, showing up when it mattered. That evening, Nathan walked outside with Ranger and sat on the porch. The fields were quiet. The farmhouse lights shone warmly behind them. He realized he was no longer the man who arrived searching for a new purpose. He had found it, not through a treasure hidden underground, not through something valuable left behind. He found it through the stories of people who believed kindness was worth protecting. Years later, when people asked Nathan about the farmhouse, he never talked about the $5 price or the secrets hidden inside. He talked about Samuel's kindness. He talked about his grandfather's friendship. He talked about Ranger and the way a loyal German Shepherd helped him discover something greater than he expected. Because the greatest discovery was never hidden in the walls of the farmhouse. It was found in the hearts of everyone who walked through its doors. And on quiet mornings, when Nathan sat on the porch, with Ranger beside him, he remembered one simple truth. Some places are not found by accident. Some places find the people who need them most.